Great. So wonderful. So as I said, Gretchen McCloy from the schools in South Portland. We are here talking today about extended learning opportunities, ELOs, and thinking creatively about how some of the models around our state different districts are using extended learning opportunities to provide credit to students in different ways. And I think especially now there's a lot more interest and people are tuning into this conversation around how can we be creative in helping students especially over the next few years, recover credits or find credits in new and different ways. And it seems like a really wonderful opportunity to kind of raise awareness of some of the great work that's already being done in our community. This conversation started as an ask to me from my principal in South Portland. She said, hey, can you help me plan an extended learning opportunity for credit for next year? And I thought, I think I would like to invite some of my colleagues from around the state who are already doing this great work to be the experts and speak about it directly. So that is what has brought us together today. We do have a flyer that we shared that had links to some pre-recorded statements from some of our experts. And I will put that again in the chat. And if you didn't get a chance to watch those videos ahead of time, totally fine. You have them as reference, so you can certainly watch them at your own leisure in another time. But it provides some additional information about some of the programs that we're going to be highlighting today. So our format will be, we have some guest speakers who will be talking briefly about their programs. And then I have a few key questions to put to our presenters around ELOs, people who are doing ELOs for core credit, ELOs for credit recovery, and ELOs for elective credit. And then beyond that, we really want this to be a space for those of you who have questions or hear something and you want to hear more about a particular topic to please speak up and certainly put questions in the chat, or when we get to a more break in the conversation, raise your hand, wave, and we'd certainly, this is meant to be a dialogue between what you need from this group and what the experts can share with you. So I will invite my colleagues who are from our C3 organization. So Maine C3 is a collection of people around the state who have jobs connecting students to career exploration. And each district who has someone in their district, it might look a little bit different. In some districts, it's a co-op teacher. In some districts, it's a JMG teacher. In my district, I'm in South Portland and I do community partnerships, but one of the hats I wear is managing job shadows, middle school job exploration, high school internships. So it's different in every district, but we really feel fortunate that there's a collection of those of us who are doing similar work around the state. And I will later put that in our chat, the C3 website. So if you are interested to learn more about that, we are also hosting our first virtual career fair and are actively recruiting students and businesses from around the state to participate. So we'll look forward to hopefully seeing some of your schools represented in that. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Allison Ellis to introduce herself, and then she'll hand it on to one of our next C3 members to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Gretchen. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Ellis. I'm the Extended Learning Opportunities Coordinator at Massabesic High School, which is in the RSU 57 district, which is made up of 6 rural towns in southern Maine. So in my position, I'm in charge of dual and concurrent enrollment, vocational advisor. So I help students with the application process and help with the communication between myself and Sanford Regional Technical Center. I also am in charge of independent studies that are offered for credit here at the high school, both for core credit as well as elective credit. And I'm also in charge of our School to Work program, which is our work-based program that allows students to earn credit while working. The other areas that I'm in charge of are Edgenuity courses, which are online classes that are offered for core, elective, and credit recovery credit. I'm also in charge of academic individual learning plans for students, which allows them to also earn credits, whether that be core credit or elective credit. So that's me in my position, and I'm happy to introduce Samantha Brink from Sanford High School.
All right, thanks, Allison. I'm Samantha Brink. I'm the Career Exploration Manager at Sanford High School and Sanford Regional Technical Center. I oversee the Extended Learning Opportunities program at Sanford High School. which is the conversation that I'll be focused on for the most part today. I also oversee internships and extended learning opportunities for Sanford Regional Technical Center. And I oversee and manage the 6th through 12th grade college career and life readiness curriculum in Sanford. So I work a little bit at the middle school as well. But focusing on kind of what our topic is today, we offer at Sanford High School, we offer ELOs for core credit, for elective credit, that would be all of the areas, right? Core and elective credit, non-credit bearing, but not that often. Most of our ELOs are credit bearing ELOs, and we offer core or elective credit. And I will turn it over to, see who's next on my screen, Dee Dee Bennell from Freeport.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dee Dee Bennell. I'm at Freeport High School, which is part of RSU 5, comprised of the towns Durham, Freeport, and Pownell. And I am the Outreach and Service Learning Coordinator at Freeport High School. And I oversee some of our extended learning opportunities that cover core credit and elective credit as well. I'm really a liaison to the community and the school and oversee opportunities for students to be engaged, and whether it's extended learning opportunities or other ways to help out in the community. We have internships, job shadows, we do dual credit as well, work study. We have all kinds of options, which I know we're going to get into more later as Gretchen asks us questions. So welcome and thanks for having us, Gretchen. Okay, next on my screen is Eliza.
Thanks, Dee Dee. Hey, everyone. I'm Eliza Kettingsburg. I'm the career coordinator with Aspire Gorham. And Aspire Gorham is a community-wide initiative that's a unique partnership between the Gorham School District, the Melmac Foundation, and Jobs for Maine's graduates. And Aspire Gorham started 3 years ago, and we've really been adding capacity to the work that the Gorham School District was already doing around extended learning opportunities and providing student-centered learning with the goal of like helping students think and plan for the future. And so in Gorham, there are 3 types of extended learning opportunities. All of them result in elective credit. There aren't any ELOs that earn core credit unless there's a special situation, which maybe happens like three to 5 times a school year, it seems. We have 1 bucket of ELOs that are housed within our workplace learning program. We have another bucket that's within that traditional independent study program that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And then sort of the most I think innovative and different ELO that we offer is a flexible learning opportunity that's more of an open-ended exploration that's meant to evolve over the course of the experience. So those are the 3. Thanks so much.
And Dan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, Dan Westhoven. I'm the Pathways Coordinator at Greeley High School. It is part of MSA D51, and we serve students from Cumberland and North Yarmouth. As the Pathways Coordinator, I do a variety of things, both credit bearing and non-credit bearing. I'll stick to the credit bearing for the purposes of this conversation today. We're in a little bit of rebranding. This is the 5th year someone's been in this position, my 3rd, and it's evolved a little bit yearly. It started kind of truly as a purely alt-ed program, and it has kind of shifted into a program that any student can really access. In terms of credit bearing opportunities that we have, we're kind of rebranding an ELO to being a true ELO, meaning an extension of anything beyond what we would offer. An example of this would be, we offer Guitar 1 and Guitar 2 in our school. If we have a student that wants to take Guitar 3, there's an ELO, a true extension beyond it. And with that, we also have an ALO, or an alternative learning option. And that is when a student is perhaps needing to access a virtual program like Edgenuity for a content area credit. or perhaps they need to create what used to be an ELO for something like physical education if they're having issues which prevent them from earning credit in a traditional way. I look at ALOs as situations where students kind of need a credit. I look at ELOs as situations where students really want a credit. And in both instances, I help with that, but I don't award the credit. A content area teacher from that department would be in charge of awarding the credit. So that's an area that can be a little bit more time consuming, a little less straightforward. The other thing that we do have is for elective credit, and that is a program that I developed called SILO, which stands for Student Directed Independent Learning Opportunities. That's a lane where I can comfortably award credit in electives, and it's really meeting the students where they're at in their interest and encouraging them to become lifelong learners or do some career exploration. So that's that was the premise of my video, was sharing the SILO program, but we do also offer other ways of awarding credit. It's just SILO is the one that I can answer from start to finish. So yeah, that's it for me. I'll pass it along to Rick.
Well, I'm not a formal speaker today. I'm just here supporting my colleagues. I'm a part of C3. I teach at Brunswick High School. I'm the ELO coordinator. I also run the volunteer program, really interface with the community a lot. Like, I love hearing the stories or the job descriptions, because it's like, I think we all do an element of, a piece of what each other does day to day. So I'm going to kind of like back out of this because this isn't my gig. I'm just here because I'm a big fan.
Great. And I will also highlight that we have a couple other C3 members on the call. We've got Lynette, Anthony, and Christy Zavaznik, and so glad to have our colleagues with us today. So to jump into the kind of the meat of the conversation, I would like to pose to our experts here, for those of you who offer ELOs for core credit, and we've heard little snippets of that already, I'm wondering if some of you who have some great programs can just speak a little bit more to that topic to start us off.
I'd be happy to kind of kick us off in that area, because I didn't get into too much in my introduction either. So like I mentioned, in Sanford, we do offer ELOs for core credit. I like the way that Greeley breaks down kind of their different names for the ALOs and the ELOs. We don't do that. We kind of put it all under the umbrella of ELO. So I'll try to break it down in my description for you guys a little bit, but we're in our 10th year of our ELO program in Sanford. And we started out as purely credit recovery, which actually really, I think, helped us be able to build a strong core credit component to our program, because so many of those credit recovery needs are in those core content areas. So right from the beginning, we designed the program in a way to allow students to get core credit by having students, no matter what they were doing, and I'll give some examples, but work with a learning team comprised of myself, a teacher from whatever content area that they are looking for credit in. So I'm a certified English teacher, so I'm able to work with them on awarding English credit, core credit, or elective credit. However, there's all kinds of other core content areas that we award credit in, namely science, some social studies, and PE is a huge one for us in Sanford. That one runs a very specific way, so I'll get into that a little bit. And math, honestly, we have not found a good way to make it work the way that, in a way that we feel comfortable with for the core content piece. But I would say English and science are definitely our two biggest core content areas, English, science, and PE. And then social studies being the next closest. So the student who chooses to do an ELO, our ELOs in Sanford function as basically like independent studies on steroids, an independent study with a strong community component. So a student who's interested in being a physical therapist maybe is going every Tuesday and Thursday during block 2 to shadow a physical therapist out of the building. And on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays during block 2, they're working on assignments and projects and things like that to meet the standards that we've pulled out of the curriculum for the content area that they're working on credit in. and designed assignments and methods of documentation to meet those standards. So it's a kind of a dual part out of the building, documenting the experience that they're having there and on site, and part combining, taking that learning they're doing there and creating actual deliverables to show that they've met the standards that we've pulled out of the curriculum for the credit that they need. Or sometimes it also looks like a student who is in, we have a technical center attached to our school. So a student who's in the building trades program and is behind on a science credit that they need, who's staying after school every day with the building trades teacher to build a structure with a living green roof that they're designing. This particular example that I'm giving is a specific student from several years ago who was actually needed a half a math credit and a half a science credit. So designed and built this structure with a living green roof to get those credits that they needed. That student did not have the capacity or the resources to make it anywhere outside of the building. They were in their second year as a senior and really needed to finish up the credits that they needed to get across that stage at the end of the year. So it's really kind of a big spectrum, everything in between there as well of what we're able to do. It's really working creatively with the student. A huge part of the intake meeting that I do with a student is, what are your goals? Do you have any credit needs? What are your goals? And because it's not always a credit recovery situation, sometimes it's a situation where, like I'll go back to my physical therapy example, so I'm not throwing too many things out there. But maybe it's a student who does know that they're working really hard to get into the physical therapy program that they want to go to. And so they really want to be able to devote as much time in their schedule, their senior year, as they can to get this experience under their belt. So they are spending half their day out at an internship site for their ELO. And that means they don't have that time to take the senior English that they need to take, or things like that. So we're taking what they're doing out there, and we're creating English-based assignments for them based on the learning that they're doing out during their job shadows to get them that credit that they need. So sometimes it means me, another teacher in the building, and the community partner, whoever that mentor is at the community partner site, is the learning team. Sometimes it's just me and that community partner. That's the learning team, depending on what credit area they're looking to get credit in. But it really kind of just depends. PE, I'm going to touch on really quickly because I know I've already been talking a while, but for our PE program runs very specifically. That one does not change from student to student. That is with specific criteria to qualify to be able to be part of that program, because we honestly need a way to control the numbers. It is wildly popular. We have a partnership with our local YMCA, who provides free memberships to students enrolled in the PE aspect of the ELO program. And so students that are uncomfortable for whatever reason, in a traditional PE class, or are behind on the PE credits they need for graduation, will go to the gym, work out there, document their hours, get it signed off by people there. They have different reflection assignments that they have to do, and it hits our personal fitness requirement. There's some questions coming in, so I just want to take a second to peek these. To what extent do you work directly with the content area teacher on developing the credit recovery plan? So if I am bringing in a content area teacher, they're really working with me right from the beginning. I don't feel like I can comfortably or straight face test a science credit that I can just make up the whole thing. I have been doing this a while, so I certainly provide a lot of ideas of, projects that have worked well in the past, that this type of project hits these standards. And I know that that type of project can be adapted in these different ways to hit the topic that the student's working on. I'll certainly offer ideas, but that content area teacher is involved right from the beginning. Once I know what the student's interest is, if they're doing it for credit recovery, the basis of what we're designing is with that in mind. So I'm going right out to the teacher that and I ask the student who they'd like to work with, because I definitely found students are much more successful well, two-part. Students are much more successful if they're working with a teacher that they already have a relationship with, especially in credit recovery situations. And two, the teacher is a lot more likely to say yes when you can go to them with the ask that this student specifically requested to work with you because of the great relationship they said they have with you. It just gets you a yes a little bit easier. So they're involved right from the beginning, and all of my students do their work on Google Classroom now. So most of those, if they're credit areas that I'm not the one signing off on the credit at the end, if we have another teacher involved, we're both added onto that Google Classroom as teachers. There's a lot more questions. Do we want to jump around to others, or should I keep answering things? I'll let Gretchen kind of.
I think you can keep following up with the other part of that for Christy.
Oh, okay. The other two are the same. I see. Okay.
Yes.
So approximately what percentage of the students in ELOs are doing it for credit recovery? For PE specifically, I'm going to talk into like PE and non-PE. PE, 75%, non-PE, 20%.
20% are for
approximations, or our credit recovery. It was specific to credit recovery. Yeah. Of total ELOs, 95% are credit bearing in Sanford.
So just to make that clear, so the ELOs that you're running are not primarily for credit recovery. You're doing ELOs for really enrichment. So in this conversation, if the goal is we need credit recovery options, ELOs might be a creative way of doing it, but there's so much more to extended learning opportunities than credit recovery.
And it's not like a fail-safe solution. So it is certainly an option that should be, that it's awesome if it's on the table and it's there to work, but it's not always the best option for a credit recovery student. So if you have a credit recovery student that is struggling to get themselves where they need to be and to get through their regular day, adding on an extra component where they have to go somewhere and do something else is not always a feasible solution. I definitely have done credit recovery ELOs in the past where I've taken the job a student already has and turned it into a credit bearing experience by saying, okay, you know what, this student, this needs whatever, he spends all of his time outside of work, in a lot of his time outside of school, and a lot of his time he's supposed to be in school at work. He's the only person bringing in money for his family, and they're directly counting on him to make sure they have something to eat tonight. He's not going to care about anything else I give him to care about. So the conversation then becomes, awesome, tell me about your job at McDonald's. What do you do when you're there? Well, I do this and this and this. Well, what's your favorite part of what you do? And if you like pull long enough, you can get to this like, okay, you really like to work with people and communicate in this way. And then it's taking it and pulling it apart until you can like find this way to build this essential question to then build a credit around. So it is certainly workable, not always the best solution for people credit recovery, but it's a really good option to have on the table.
Thank you. That's great.
I'm wondering if we should stay on this thread of credit recovery for a minute. Any of the rest of our panel want to jump in on credit recovery conversation?
I can talk about it. I'm running credit recovery right now, so I'm happy to talk about ours right now. So this year we did credit recovery a little bit differently. We're doing it completely virtually through Edgenuity, which is our online program. So we have spots through the Edgenuity program that we utilize every 10 days. A new student is going into the program. We built courses on the Edgenuity program for credit recovery specifically in every content area, all the major content areas, I should say, like English, social studies, math, and science. We also have the opportunity for health as well. So students have depending on the course that they need credit recovery for, we built a class on the platform that they access for 10 days, and then the next student goes in. So we've been able to kind of like have multiple students complete multiple credits through credit recovery, and then have multiple students complete it in like a pathway style where they complete one and then the next student goes. So that's worked out really well. other areas that we offer credit recovery credit is through our alternative ed program. So I work closely with our alternative ed program for credits and what those look like to build opportunities for students in the major content areas. I'm also a certified social studies teacher, so I'm able to do all of those credits on my own. And then if it's a content area that I'm not able to give credit for, I work with the department heads on that and what that will look like.
Speak about at Freeport High School, very similar to Allison. We have a platform called Play-Doh. It's a computer-based curriculum that's used for credit recovery and academic remediation. And it's an online course, and we offer English, art, history, math, all kinds of courses and options. It's pretty independent. We do have a specific teacher that's hired to oversee the Play-Doh curriculum and help support those students. We also use private tutors sometimes. Right now, we have a couple kids that are at risk for graduation, so we're using some of the CARES money, and we have some outside tutoring coming into the building to work directly with the students. And we also have an alternative program called Endeavor, and that serves as credit recovery. They can do science, English, and social studies while getting social and emotional support as well, and just not having to be in the mainstream classrooms.
I'll jump in. We also, like a few other folks, have those online credit recovery platforms, but as it relates to ELOs, I've supported a handful of credit recovery ELOs. So students who bombed a class and were not motivated to retake that class and needed to be plugged into something that would be really exciting and motivating for them. And we found a lot of success in that. Students coming out of that credit recovery ELO, seeing themselves again as students who could be successful in school. With that said, it takes a lot more capacity and people power to make that happen. And so it's really dependent on the staffing structure. But I think that if we're prioritizing students having a renewed sense of self after failing a class, like a supported ELO as a form of credit recovery is a really powerful way to do that.
I'll say
So
something
it sounds, hey, I just want to jump in. It sounds to me like, these credit recovery ELOs are really a form of part of the plate, the platter that you offer in your schools. So it's not just the only option for the way students can recover.
Yeah, I mentioned that Sanford started our program as a credit recovery only program. And when I say this is part of the problem with like ELOs right now is we all define it a little bit different. It'll be helpful when I know the state will be coming out with some official definitions, and it's going to really help us all, I think, because in Sanford, we define ELOs as a very specific thing. Whereas, we have an online program that we use too with a different teacher who oversees that whole program for credit recovery too. But we started our ELOs, those community experiences, as credit recovery only, and really found pretty quickly in that first year that it needed to also be an enrichment. Credit recovery needed to just be a piece of the puzzle for ELOs, that the program was going to be much more successful and gain a lot more traction and help a lot more students if it was really open to all of those things. And I think that's really guided us to keeping a super flexible program that's very student-centered, that is like, so Sally comes in and sits down and I have a conversation with her to say, okay, it's to pull apart what her goals are and then build from there. So it lets us address those credit recovery needs if that's the situation that we're in. It lets us address those enrichment offerings if that's the situation we're in. It lets us combine all of those things like Eliza's talking about. And I think that's really where the strength in these types of programs lies.
I can just chime in on credit recovery real quick at Greeley. It really depends whether or not I'm involved on really how much, what we're trying to recover. You know, if we're really far off the target, it might make more sense for the student to kind of start over, and we could look at an alternative through my program. But in terms of recovering something that has already been started or trying to salvage that, it really depends on where we're at in that process with that student. In the past, we've had some project-based experiences for students if they struggled in a content area like biology. You know, can we get them to volunteer on a farm and then bring that learning to life for them so that they can make better sense of what the assignments are, maybe tap into a strength that they have to boost their own self-esteem and motivation. You know, I have a background in special education. I always use the term desk allergy. Certain students have it and they just need to be in a different environment. And sometimes that can be really comprehensive. One of my first students I worked with, and he still has one of my favorite quotes is, you know, my internship is why I'm not dropping out. He was really, he was a senior. He transferred as a junior. He didn't have a tribe here at the school. He didn't have a ton of friends. There's not a lot of glue, but he loved music. And we were able to get him an internship at a local nonprofit that specializes in music. They were willing to take him on as an intern. And I use that term loosely, a high school student intern. And he found his tribe and he was able to tolerate school, and we customized assignments for him in both English and social studies so that he could get through to what he needed to get through. You know, we're still building that, but my program or Pathways is going to be a part of the credit recovery process moving forward. It just really depends on where the student's at, what we're trying to recover, and what makes the most sense. And also part of that is like, are we trying to establish a pass-fail grade, or are we going to try to look for a number or letter grade out of this? And, you know, I think it's kind of abstract. You can tell if a student put forth the effort to pass something, but it's difficult to put a number to that sometimes. So that's one of the things that we're kind of working on here. And honestly, we just have to do what we can to meet them where they're at, especially now. There's a lot of students that are really struggling with these new formats of school, but learning isn't necessarily the issue at all. And we have to find ways to help them learn and meet them where they're at. And Pathways has the flexibility to do that. And I guess the only other thing to say about that is we sometimes are handcuffed. We've established some prerequisites with both credit recovery and ELOs. One example of that is, you know, we won't really entertain a PE ELO unless a student has completed an intro course. And what happens through that is they've met a preponderance of the state standards through intro. So then we have some flexibility on helping them get over the hump. So, you know, there's a lot to it. And I think that's the important part of having a person that specializes in this in a school is like, we have the time to find the time to do this. We don't necessarily have it, but we have the resources. And again, one of my favorite things about C3 is we have each other. So I'll stop now.
Can any of you speak to Christy's question about how closely you're working with social services, what social service team members in your buildings, whether it's school counselors or social workers, and how they play into your process?
I work very closely with mine. In fact, I just was called into the guidance office yesterday, just being alerted that 2 students are going to come see me seeking internships for not necessarily credit recovery, but just to get another kind of credit. So yeah, we are in constant contact, and as the needs grow in their world, especially around a lot of mental health issues on the rise and anxiety, and they're focused on college stuff, they're really going to defer more to me in my role to help out with this stuff, as well as all the career exploration, things that they were able to do at one point in time. But we have 3 counselors on staff for 600 students, and they're pretty taxed. So yeah, the quick answer is yes, I work very closely, and the social worker as well.
To piggyback off of that, I work very, very closely with school counselors and social workers. Very frequently when I meet with students, I'm with their counselor or I follow up with their counselor. We share Google documents of like notes of meetings and stuff like that, and future plans and goals together. So, and that's all shared among us. And we meet as a whole department every week and going over ELOs and opportunities for students and what's next and planning. So very, very closely.
I'm also working really closely with both guidance and social workers. I don't necessarily have a department, but if I did, it would be somewhere between guidance and social work. And you know, the starting points for students doing business with me, a lot of it comes from guidance. Sometimes it comes from social workers, and sometimes there's a really direct plan, and other times it's just so a student has an adult in the building, another adult that kind of sees them and can try to help support some of their interests. But yeah, it's very, my background as a special educator. I always worked really closely in kind of smaller settings with comprehensive teams. And a big part of that was, you know, working with social workers and figuring out not just the academic side of this, but the social and emotional side of this. Because I think that really is like a linchpin for students learning. They have to feel good about certain things in order to kind of either tolerate or thrive in other environments. So yeah, I work very closely with them. I'd say most of my referrals come from them or from siblings I've worked with in the past.
Yeah, like everyone else, the relationship with guidance and social work is essential. I also think the distinction between our roles is also an important one for all of us to keep in mind, because I think to add value to our school and to make ELOs and the other work we're doing a priority, we really have to, in my opinion, that has to come first so that our time isn't absorbed in some of the other aspects that school counselors are focused on. And I know colleagues of mine in similar roles sometimes have lost the time necessary to focus on this work because they've ended up prioritizing their time on school counselor and social work-esque work.
A middle school question, sorry, there's a middle school question that came in on the chat that is really interesting because I would assume the broader definition of ELO that would encompass basically anything besides sitting in a traditional classroom would be the most applicable at a middle school level, because getting independent students out of the build, this was my thought process, sorry, when I read your question, getting students out of the building to work with community partners on an individual basis instead of like as whole groups would be quite the challenge. Because definitely the largest challenge that I face in my program is transportation, even at the high school level. So I think that piece at the middle school level would just be that much greater. But that's an interesting, I would like to hear the answer to it too, I guess. My answer is in Sanford, no, I don't think so. Nothing that I am involved in. And aside from, again, like general career, I mentioned that I oversee the college career and life readiness curriculum for 6th through 12th grade. So at that level, we're bringing people into the building and we're maybe organizing trips out of the building. But on an individual student basis, I don't believe that there's anything going on at our middle school, but I'd be curious to hear if others have. I see Lynette wrote that you've put a couple together, but they didn't end up actually happening. Yeah. It made me think that like something I wanted to mention or throw out to the group is that transportation is the largest hurdle that that we experience in this work. That we don't have 99% of Maine does not have access to public transportation that we can use for things. And then you're relying on individual students having the ability to transport themselves, which is an equity issue. So definitely the largest hurdle. I wish I had an answer for it, but I don't.
I can comment too. I know that it's often a struggle as well to get students that aren't a certain age into a business. So that really limits some certain opportunities that we might have. You know, that said, I have had a fair amount of 8th grade teachers, especially this year, reach out to me, kind of getting students on the radar or directly introducing them to me to be ready for them to discuss potential silo project opportunities for them for next year. And I also, actually just today, we had a student in the middle school who is an overachiever with his online work, and they're looking for ways to further engage him and do some real interest-based stuff. And they actually asked for the silo program information that I developed. And, you know, there's a lot of survival mode this year, but one of my big hopes is that we can try to build on that to see if there's ways to adjust the program, tweak the program so that middle schoolers could access it. Again, I don't think it would be credit bearing on the high school side, but it could give them, you know, a lot of our focus is the transition out of high school, at least in my work, what's next. But I do think there's a lot of room for the transition in. And that's, you know, something that's developing, but isn't necessarily the bread or butter of what I do.
I will speak briefly to the middle school level in South Portland. We are able to send all of our 8th graders out for a job shadow day. And granted, it's just one day, but I think that the biggest hurdle or challenge that I see with middle schoolers is just supervision and our comfort level with sending those younger learners out in either independent opportunities or in small groups. And it's something that we're continuing to be really thoughtful about and how we continue to develop our middle school programming. Other questions from the audience? We have some really great experts here and we could all talk for hours on this, but we'd like to talk about the things that are most of interest to you all who have made the time to join us today. So if you have questions, put them in the chat or just wave your hand or raise. Okay, so are any of our schools considering the state rethinking remote education ventures REV grant to expand your supports for an implementation of ELOs? So it looks like we have a few on the call. Any of you want to chime in? Lynette, or feel free to jump in too. I know you've been putting some energy into this.
Sure. Yeah, I've just finished my class that I had to take in order to get started in the direction of being eligible for the REV award, and my the second in our district is taking it starting next week, so we'll be eligible to put in our award proposal for the first round of grants. Of awards. Yes, the award funding, especially in its ability to pay for things like transportation, to pay for supplies, to pay for things that are right now really challenging to convince the district is worth adding to our line items, to adding to the budget. But with a few years of really solid proof that it's helpful for our students and it gets them where they need to go and actually ends up saving money in the long term and having really good results. Definitely thinking of doing it and on our way towards making it happen. Ours isn't for ELOs in general because we're already doing ELO work, and the REV program is designed for like innovative things that are different than what you've already started. So ours is kind of like a much bigger picture than that. But I'm hopeful, and I've seen that there are some places that don't have ELOs that are happening yet that are looking to REV funding to get it started for the first time.
If I can just add to that, as the director of the REV project, we are definitely reaching out to as many folks as possible. And ELOs are one of the 4 core tenets of what we're trying to do. So, we are excited to be able to share this opportunity and this idea with folks. And, I encourage you guys to reach out to your teams as well, because even though you have ELOs, there's so many extensions of that you could do that could incorporate some of the ideas of the REV grant within it. So definitely excited to share the opportunity with you guys and share the wealth, because there is up to $850,000 per superintendent region throughout the state of Maine in the next 3 years. So there's some funding out there to do some pretty unique things, and we are really just looking to support educators doing things that they've suddenly been given permission to do in the last year. So let's use this momentum to create some great opportunities. And to Lynette's credit, her proposal may not be an ELO one, but it was very unique and really appropriate for what we're looking to do. So I'm excited to see where that goes. If you have any questions about ELOs, we're in the DOE website. Go to that and email me or call me, and be willing to set up a situation or a conversation with you independently or a group of your teachers at any point, because we're out there and we really want to be able to support as many folks as possible. So
Great.
I know that there's a few folks in this room that are potentially going to be in one of our upcoming classes, Mr. Wilson. So if you have any questions, ask him.
Great. And Martin, feel free to put your contact info or your website in the chat box if you want to throw that over there as well.
I have a kind of a general question. You know, Scarborough has started, as you know, we're all on the C3 collegial connection here. We started with internships, and we're really trying to build out more credit-bearing opportunities for job shadows and different opportunities for students to gain credit. So how could you know, we have a teacher on the call right now. Carrie, I hate to put you on the spot, but you have a student, for example, that will be a TA next year, and you've had to structure this as a kind of an independent study. And it's, how has that process been for you? And do you see other opportunities that could come from it for other students?
Yeah, I have a student who's very well versed in mathematics, sciences, and robotics. And he's been a leader across the field in many different things for us. And to be honest, he was very good at coding, and actually he's learning coding, but he's good at it, but he wants to get better. And so part of the robotics program, that's not my strong suit. So I thought, why not bring kids get along with kids, and sometimes they know more than teachers. And so I asked him if he'd be interested in helping me co-teach part of, or being a teaching assistant. And he thought it was a great idea. I looked at it from a point of view of also helping for his resume when he goes to college as well, because he's looking at some pretty high powered schools, and being able to put on his resume that he actually worked with peers, because working with peers, as you guys know, is very difficult sometimes. And I know that Scarborough is also doing some independent studies with kids in the art department. I guess the art department's very strong in doing that. So my goal in this is to allow kids to reach beyond what their comfort zone is, and working with students, but also becoming stronger in presenting materials and actually becoming more well-versed in what they need to go out into the working world and the next step in the college. So I see myself, especially in robotics and engineering, which I do in Scarborough, is I have a boy right now, and he was in the classroom when Gretchen came on, or I came on with Gretchen, who's actually doing an independent study with me for the next 4 weeks on wind turbines, and looking at the 20 lesson plans in the wind turbines to see if it's worth doing for us in May, and also for next year. He's already done some projects for me, but I figured let him run with that, and he was more than happy to do that. It's a little bit self-motivating and independent. So I see reaching out to kids who are strong in things, willing to take risk and work with peers at the same time, be good for. He's also a robotics student, by the way. But so I look
to award that with credit, and to have a structure in place to do that. And
right.
I know more of us and more schools want to be able to
right. And I don't know exactly, I think, but Ryan was on, I think Ryan, we talked about it, and I think he's going to receive some, actually will receive credit for helping me next year. So I would like to have a huge cache of students being able to do that. It gives the kids an opportunity, but at the same time puts them in a different perspective, and it helps out teachers. And I'm first one to admit, I don't know everything that I'm doing. And so I'm going to be learning in the process. So I think it'll be good for the kids. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Can our group speak to the successes and challenges around equity when we're thinking about ELOs? I know for some of us, as was mentioned earlier, the transportation piece is certainly an inequity. And for me in South Portland, we are fortunate that we have public transportation, but there are different opportunities available for the students who can drive themselves, if that is an opportunity for them. But
I think definitely that flexibility piece that I've touched on a couple of times, of the ability to really customize to what the student's situation is, what their circumstances are, the time that they have, the goals that they have, even if they really aren't sure what they are, helping them get to that point. I think that our strength in this area and the equity area lies in that as well. I mean, certainly, like Gretchen was just saying, and like I said earlier, the challenge is transportation. But the success, I think, is that you can design something different for each student, depending on what's going to work the best for them, which helps them be successful. And then they get to be successful, which goes into, I don't remember now who was saying it, but that getting to be successful in an area that you maybe haven't been before can be reinvigorating. And I think that piece that I always makes me feel so fortunate to get to do this work, I think ties into this question too, of like, I get to work with students on things that they're interested in all of the time, which is a luxury that most teachers do not have, right? So being able to really design whatever experience that student needs and whatever's going to work for them, even when it's has to be super creative, like maybe there's not any way that we can get the student physically to a different location, whether it's because of their circumstances and what they have access to, or whether it's because of the subject that they're interested in, or what, then we just tie in virtual components or things like that. And we set up Skype interviews. This was, I guess now it's Zoom interviews because everybody knows Zoom. But before it was like Skype calls or things like that, or online. I've used online NASA forums to connect people to things and use those as those community connections. The ability to really be creative in how you design each experience and being able to tailor it to the student. There's just not a lot of times that you get to be that flexible with it and that customized.
Eliza, go ahead.
Dee Dee, do you want to go first?
Oh.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, for us, the biggest thing really is transportation, but then also it's also for kids that the struggle can be if they just don't have the same kind of support or encouragement from home. That sometimes can be a barrier, even if we set things up for them. One example I'm thinking of recently, we have a gal who's a senior, and we figured out sort of a mini internships / job shadow. She wants to go into cosmetology school. And so we have a salon that she can walk to. We also got her a job during some of the school hours so she can do work to study. And but just finding the intrinsic motivation to make it all happen, despite us, putting everything in place for her and making it possible. So that can be a real challenge too. So it's really hard. I see that kind of disparity in my school, but I would say the biggest thing really is transportation and some of the socioeconomical stuff.
Absolutely. And I feel very strongly that if we care about equity in this work, we have to look at which students are doing ELOs and check it against our demographics, our population, and work really hard to make sure that we have a representative spread of students who are supporting in ELOs. And that might mean doing targeted recruitment and providing additional support, because I think the tendency, if you're not focused on proactive data, looking at the data and being proactive, is that our highest achieving students are taking advantages of these opportunities. And actually, we may be widening that gap accidentally as a result. And so I think for me in this work, that is a number one priority, to be thinking about whether we're serving the full population.
Yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
I was going to say, I don't want to, in doing my early presentation, and Eliza, you came up with something, I want to make sure that I'm trying to reach out to kids who just aren't, motivated, and like, well, I would say one tier of kids who are at this level. We have a boy who transferred in from another system, who we did a boat project, and he made a steel boat, which I've never seen before, and he welded it and he put it together, and it's a high grade steel. And the boat actually, I knew it was going to float, but he didn't think it was going to float. And now I've asked him if he'd be willing to next year to help weld and do projects with us going forward, to showing kids about welding. And I have a son who's an engineer, and he has welders working for him and are making $125,000 a year. And so I try to explain to him, and as well as all the kids in the class, there's avenues for you to be successful, that sometimes you don't have to go in the direction that everybody else is going in. There's opportunities for you. So that's just one example. And then there's another example. I have another student helping me who didn't think they were going to do very much, but after talking to them, they're helping me help with another student. And to me, it was a college prep student who just stepped forward. So I'm trying, from my point of view, I'm trying, and you talk about equity on the busings, I'm trying to have equity in all levels of the students to allow them to feel as if they're very strong and they have something to contribute. And that opens up more doors for my kids going forward. So, and Ryan and Christy have been really helpful with me doing that. So I just want to acknowledge what they're doing. It's a lot of time, but it's rewarding as hell, you know.
We're lucky to have you. We're lucky to have you.
Yeah. I do want to be thoughtful about the time. I know all of us have like lots of things that are going on. Part of our purpose is just to start this conversation. Our C3 team could talk about this for hours and are very passionate about this for hours. And part of this is just to build some connections and introductions for all of you who are here or watching this later. So if there are things that sparked your interest today and you want to hear more from a specific school, I put the C3 website in the chat box, and all of our contact information is available from C3 from our website. And I think I can speak for all of our C3 members that we really would like to feel free to reach out to us, because our jobs are specific to our district, but we're really passionate about supporting this work across the state. And we know there's some really great established programs out there, but also some programs that are looking to grow and build. And we are a resource for each other. And it's really been a joy to be a part of this journey. If anyone has last burning things, feel free to shout out, but that was just my way of wrapping things up for us. Great. Well, thank you all for joining us, and please do reach out if things come up for you in the future.
Thanks, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Oh, hi.